Daphne, a Gorn diplomat, staggers into Wilson's convenience store seeking water, but the human cashier gives her something else entirely. The sweltering Texas heat beats down on New Austin as Daphne's scaled form pushes through the glass doors, her elongated snout flaring with each labored breath. Lawrence Wilson, the 28-year-old owner, freezes behind the counter, his eyes widening at the sight of the reptilian alien. Panic grips Lawrence's chest, but as Daphne stumbles, her clawed hand grasping at empty air, his shock gives way to concern. He vaults over the counter, rushing to her side. "Water," Daphne croaks, her voice a dry rasp. Lawrence's heart sinks as he remembers the depleted water supply, victim to the relentless heat wave gripping the region. With no time to waste, Lawrence darts to the back room. He emerges clutching a bottle of his homemade electrolyte drink, a secret concoction he developed for extreme sports. "Try this," he urges, pressing the cool container into Daphne's trembling hands. As the liquid touches Daphne's tongue, an unexpected sensation washes over her. The drink's unique chemical composition interacts with her Gorn physiology, sending a rush of euphoria through her body. Her senses sharpen, and she becomes acutely aware of Lawrence's presence. His scent, the concern in his eyes, the sheen of sweat on his brow. Outside, the unforgiving sun bakes the pavement as a group of anti-alien protesters begins to gather. They've spotted Daphne entering the human-owned store, and their angry voices rise, threatening to shatter the fragile peace. Unaware of the brewing storm outside, Daphne finds herself captivated by Lawrence's physical form. This new attraction bewilders her, foreign to the typical mating instincts of her species. Lawrence, too, feels an unexpected pull towards the alien diplomat, her exotic features both strange and alluring. The security cameras silently record their interaction, unwittingly capturing evidence that could impact the delicate diplomatic situation between Earth and the Gorn Confederacy. Tensions have been rising as negotiations for a crucial trade agreement stall, pushing both civilizations to the brink of an interstellar economic crisis. Daphne's mission to Earth is a last-ditch effort to prevent this crisis from spiraling into war. The summer heat wave has only exacerbated resource shortages in both human and Gorn communities, raising the stakes of her diplomatic endeavor to new heights. As Daphne's condition stabilizes, the reality of their situation begins to sink in. The protesters outside grow louder, their chants echoing through the store's thin walls. Lawrence and Daphne exchange worried glances, realizing they're trapped inside the convenience store, forced into an unexpected proximity that could change the course of interstellar relations. In this moment of crisis, a human and a Gorn find themselves united by circumstance, their chance encounter holding the potential to bridge the gap between their species or widen it irreparably. As the heat rises and tensions mount, the fate of two worlds hangs in the balance, all because a Gorn diplomat just wanted water and a human cashier gave her something else entirely. The chants of the protesters grew louder, their angry voices penetrating the thin walls of Wilson's convenience store. Lawrence's eyes darted between Daphne and the front entrance, his mind racing to formulate a plan. The Gorn diplomat's scaled form tensed, her elongated snout twitching as she sensed the growing danger. "We need to get you out of here," Lawrence whispered urgently, his hand instinctively reaching for Daphne's arm. The touch sent a jolt through both of them, intensifying the strange connection that had begun to form. Without hesitation, Lawrence guided Daphne towards the back of the store. "There's another way out," he explained, leading her through the stockroom. The narrow space was cluttered with boxes and shelves, forcing them to navigate carefully. Lawrence grabbed a few more bottles of his homemade electrolyte drink, stuffing them into a small backpack as they moved. They emerged into a sun-baked alley behind the store, the heat hitting them like a physical force. Lawrence's old pickup truck sat there, a rusted relic that had seen better days. He fumbled with his keys, acutely aware of the protesters' voices growing closer. "Get in," he urged, helping Daphne into the passenger seat. The Gorn diplomat hesitated for a moment, her reptilian eyes fixed on Lawrence. I cannot compromise my mission," she said, her voice a mixture of uncertainty and purpose. The sound of breaking glass from the front of the store made the decision for her. Lawrence jumped into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life as he turned the key. They peeled out of the alley just as the first protesters rounded the corner, their angry shouts fading into the distance. As they sped through the outskirts of New Austin, Daphne felt a strange sensation coursing through her body. The electrolyte drink she had consumed earlier seemed to be having an unexpected effect on her Gorn physiology. Her scaled skin began to emit a faint, iridescent glow, pulsing in rhythm with her quickened heartbeat. Lawrence couldn't help but steal glances at his alien passenger. The shimmering light emanating from Daphne's skin cast a mesmerizing glow throughout the truck's cab. He felt an inexplicable pull towards her, a desire that defied logic and species barriers. Daphne, too, found herself drawn to the human cashier. His scent, the perseverance in his eyes, the way his muscles tensed as he gripped the steering wheel, it all awakened something primal within her. She shifted in her seat, moving closer to Lawrence, her scaled hand tentatively reaching out to touch his arm. The contact sent a surge of electricity through both of them. Lawrence swerved slightly, caught off guard by the intensity of the sensation. He regained control of the vehicle, his knuckles tightening as he gripped the wheel tighter. "Where are we going?" Daphne asked, her voice husky and low. Lawrence swallowed hard, trying to focus on the road ahead. "My family has an old farm on the outskirts of town. It's abandoned now, but it should be safe. We can lay low there until things calm down." As they drove, the radio crackled to life with a news alert. The announcer's voice filled the cab, tense and urgent. "Breaking news. Gorn diplomat Daphne has disappeared from New Austin. Both human and Gorn authorities are in uproar, with each side accusing the other of foul play. The situation has escalated tensions between Earth and the Gorn Confederacy to unprecedented levels." Lawrence and Daphne exchanged worried glances. The gravity of their situation began to sink in, yet neither could deny the growing attraction between them. They arrived at the farm as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown fields. The old barn loomed before them, its weathered wood a testament to years of neglect. Lawrence parked the truck behind the structure, out of sight from the main road. "We should be safe here for now," he said, helping Daphne out of the vehicle. The touch of her scaled hand in his sent another jolt through his system. They made their way into the barn, the musty smell of hay and old wood enveloping them. Lawrence found an old lantern and lit it, casting a warm glow throughout the space. In the soft light, Daphne's iridescent skin seemed to shimmer even more intensely. I don't understand what's happening," Daphne said, her voice trembling slightly. "This attraction, it's not normal for my species." Lawrence stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible force. "I feel it too," he admitted, his hand reaching up to caress Daphne's scaled cheek. Their faces inched closer, the air between them charged with tension. Just as their lips were about to meet, the sound of tires on gravel outside shattered the moment. Lawrence's eyes widened in alarm. He quickly extinguished the lantern and peered through a crack in the barn's wooden slats. A black government SUV had pulled up, its headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. "Quick, hide in the hayloft," Lawrence whispered urgently to Daphne. She hesitated for a moment, torn between her diplomatic duties and her newfound feelings for Lawrence. The sound of a car door slamming made the decision for her, and she quickly scrambled up the ladder to the hayloft. Lawrence took a deep breath, steeling himself as he stepped out of the barn to face the newcomer. A stern-faced man in a dark suit emerged from the SUV, his eyes scanning the property with laser-like focus. "Lawrence Wilson?" the man asked, his voice clipped and authoritative. Lawrence nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. "That's me. And you are?" "Agent Marcus Steele, Bureau of Extraterrestrial Affairs," the man replied, flashing a badge. "I'm here about the missing Gorn diplomat. I have reason to believe you may have information about her whereabouts." Lawrence's heart raced as he felt the weight of the moment. The future of human-Gorn relations could hinge on his next words. In the barn behind him, Daphne listened intently, her own future and the fate of her diplomatic mission hanging in the balance. Agent Steele's eyes narrowed as he studied Lawrence's face. "Mr. Wilson, I'm going to need to search these premises. If you're hiding the diplomat, I strongly advise you to come clean now. The consequences of obstructing a federal investigation could be severe." Lawrence's mind whirled, caught between protecting Daphne and avoiding an interstellar incident. As Agent Steele took a step toward the barn, Lawrence knew he had only moments to decide his next move. Lawrence's heart pounded as he weighed his options. The fate of interstellar relations hung in the balance, and he had mere seconds to act. Taking a deep breath, he made his decision. "Agent Steele, I appreciate your concern," Lawrence said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I was just checking on some old farm equipment in the barn. Why don't I help you search the property? I know every nook and cranny here." Steele's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. "Very well, Mr. Wilson. Lead the way." Lawrence guided the agent towards the barn, his mind racing. As they approached the weathered structure, he whispered urgently, "Daphne, stay hidden. I have a plan." Inside the barn, Lawrence pretended to stumble, knocking over a stack of rusty paint cans. The resulting clatter echoed through the space, masking any sounds Daphne might make. "Careful there," Steele said, his attention drawn to the mess. As the agent bent to examine the spilled paint, Lawrence caught a glimpse of movement in the hayloft. Daphne was making her way towards a small window, her scaled form barely visible in the dim light. "Agent Steele," Lawrence called, deliberately turning the man away from Daphne's escape route. "I think I heard something over by those old tractors. Shall we check it out?" While Steele investigated the tractors, Lawrence watched from the corner of his eye as Daphne slipped out of the window and dropped silently to the ground outside. She darted towards the nearby cornfield, her iridescent scales shimmering briefly in the moonlight before disappearing among the tall stalks. After a thorough but fruitless search of the barn, Steele's frustration was palpable. "Mr. Wilson, I'll be frank. Your behavior seems suspicious. I'm placing this farm under surveillance. If I find out you're hiding anything—" "I understand, Agent Steele," Lawrence replied, feigning innocence. "I hope you find the diplomat soon. The last thing we need is an interstellar incident." As Steele's SUV pulled away, Lawrence waited a moment before heading toward the cornfield. The rustling stalks surrounded him as he pushed through, searching for Daphne. "Lawrence?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it sent a shiver down his spine. He turned to find her crouched between two rows of corn, her scales still faintly glowing. The residual effects of the electrolyte drink seemed to intensify in the close quarters of the cornfield. "Are you all right?" he asked, reaching out to help her up. As their hands touched, the spark between them reignited. Without warning, Daphne pulled Lawrence close, her reptilian features softening with an unmistakable look of desire. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, the contrast of her cool scales against his warm skin, sending waves of sensation through both of them. The moment was shattered by the sound of engines approaching. Lawrence reluctantly pulled away, peering through the corn stalks. His heart sank as he saw a convoy of government vehicles pulling up to the farm. "We need to move," he whispered urgently. "There's an old irrigation pipe that runs under the next property. It's our best chance." Grasping Daphne's hand, Lawrence led her through the cornfield. They reached a rusted metal pipe jutting from the ground, its opening barely large enough for them to squeeze through. "Ladies first," Lawrence said with a nervous smile. Daphne entered the pipe, her lithe form easily slipping inside. Lawrence followed, the tight space forcing their bodies close together. The coolness of Daphne's scales contrasted sharply with the heat building between them, their shared breaths echoing in the confined space. After what felt like an eternity of crawling, they emerged on the other side, finding themselves in a small clearing. The sound of an engine caught Lawrence's attention. "Mike," he called out softly. A figure stepped out from behind a nearby hangar. "Lawrence, what the hell are you doing here? And who's— oh." Mike Rodriguez, Lawrence's childhood friend, stood slack-jawed at the sight of Daphne. The Gorn diplomat straightened up, her regal bearing evident despite the dirt smudging her scales. "Mike, I need your help," Lawrence said quickly. "This is Daphne. She's the missing Gorn diplomat everyone's looking for. We need to get her to her diplomatic meeting before this turns into an interstellar crisis." Mike's eyes darted between Lawrence and Daphne, then to the small crop duster plane sitting in the hangar. "You want me to fly you out of here? In that?" The sound of vehicles approaching made the decision for him. "All right, get in, but if we die, I'm blaming you in the afterlife." They squeezed into the tiny cockpit, Daphne practically sitting in Lawrence's lap. As Mike fired up the engine, Lawrence caught Daphne's eye. The intensity of her gaze made his breath catch. "Hold on tight," Mike called over the roar of the propeller. The plane lurched forward, picking up speed as it rolled across the makeshift runway. Just as the first government vehicles crested the hill, they lifted off, narrowly missing the grasping hands of agents below. As they soared into the night sky, Lawrence felt a mix of exhilaration and terror. He had no idea where this impromptu flight would take them, but with Daphne pressed close against him, he knew there was no turning back. The fate of two worlds now rested in their hands, all because of a chance encounter in a convenience store and a bottle of homemade electrolyte drink. As the crop duster climbed higher into the night sky, Lawrence found himself acutely aware of Daphne's proximity in the cramped cockpit. Her cool scales pressed against him, sending shivers down his spine that had nothing to do with the altitude. The plane's constant vibrations and the lingering effects of the electrolyte drink only intensified their mutual attraction. Lawrence's breath quickened as Daphne shifted in his lap, her iridescent skin catching the moonlight filtering through the cockpit window. "You two all right back there?" Mike called over his shoulder, his voice barely audible over the engine's roar. Before Lawrence could respond, a menacing whir cut through the air. He craned his neck to look out the window, his heart sinking at the sight of a sleek black military helicopter rapidly gaining on them. "Mike, we've got company," Lawrence shouted, pointing at their pursuer. Mike's grip tightened on the controls. "Hang on tight, this might get bumpy." Without warning, the crop duster dipped sharply, eliciting a surprise gasp from Daphne. She instinctively gripped Lawrence's arm, her claws digging into his skin. The sensation sent a jolt of electricity through him, momentarily distracting him from their dire situation. Mike's piloting skills were put to the test as he maneuvered the small plane through a series of evasive maneuvers. They skimmed treetops, weaved between hills, and ducked into valleys, using the terrain to their advantage. The military helicopter, larger and less agile, struggled to keep pace. With each sudden turn and drop, Lawrence and Daphne were pressed even closer together. Her scales slid against his skin, the friction generating a heat that threatened to overwhelm him. He could feel her rapid heartbeat, matching his own frantic pulse. "Lawrence," Daphne whispered, her lips brushing his ear. "I recognize this area. There's a secret Gorn diplomatic outpost nearby." He nodded, struggling to focus on her words rather than the intoxicating sensation of her breath on his skin. "Mike," he called out. "Daphne says there's a safe place to land. Follow her directions." Under Daphne's guidance, Mike steered the crop duster towards a clearing barely visible in the moonlight. As they descended, Lawrence spotted a group of figures emerging from the tree line. Their reptilian features marked them as Gorn, and the way they moved suggested military training. The moment the plane touched down, the Gorn security forces surrounded them. A stern-looking male Gorn, his scales a deep forest green, approached as Lawrence helped Daphne out of the cockpit. "Diplomat Daphne," the Gorn officer spoke, his voice a low growl. "I am Commander Zex. We've been searching for you. Explain your disappearance and the presence of these humans." Daphne straightened, her diplomatic training kicking in despite the residual effects of the electrolyte drink. "Commander, these humans have protected me. Lawrence," she gestured to him, "saved me from dehydration and shielded me from anti-alien protesters." As Daphne spoke, the sound of rotors filled the air. The military helicopter touched down at the edge of the clearing, and a familiar figure emerged. Agent Steele, flanked by a team of armed operatives. Lawrence watched as both Gorn and human forces faced each other, weapons at the ready. The tension in the air was palpable, threatening to erupt into violence at any moment. Taking a deep breath, Lawrence stepped forward, placing himself between the two groups. "Everyone, please. There's no need for conflict. We can drive this peacefully." Agent Steele's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Wilson, step aside. This is a matter of national security." Commander Zex hissed, his forked tongue flicking out. "The diplomat is under Gorn protection. Any aggressive move will be considered an act of war." The standoff might have escalated further if not for an unexpected interruption. A group of local farmers, drawn by the commotion, arrived at the scene. Among them was a woman who immediately caught Lawrence's attention. She carried herself with the confidence of an academic, her keen eyes taking in the scene with scientific curiosity. "I'm Dr. Emily Chen," she announced, stepping forward. "I'm a xenobiologist studying Gorn physiology. Perhaps I can be of assistance." Her arrival shifted the dynamic of the confrontation. Both Steele and Zex turned their attention to her, intrigued by the possibility of a neutral party. "Dr. Chen," Steele began, "we have reason to believe a potentially dangerous substance was given to the Gorn diplomat. It needs to be analyzed immediately." Zex nodded in agreement, surprising everyone. "For once, I concur with the human. This drink has had an unusual effect on diplomat Daphne. It must be studied." Lawrence felt a mix of relief and disappointment as the focus shifted away from him and Daphne. While the immediate danger seemed to have passed, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret that their intimate adventure might be coming to an end. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up at the mention of the drink. "I have a fully equipped lab at the university's research facility nearby. We could conduct a thorough analysis there, under the supervision of both human and Gorn representatives." After a tense moment of consideration, both Steele and Zex agreed to the proposal. As the groups prepared to depart for the research facility, Lawrence found himself ushered into a vehicle alongside Daphne. As they settled into their seats, their eyes met. The air between them crackled with unwill-powered tension, promises of what might have been, and perhaps what still could be. Lawrence's hand brushed against Daphne's scales, sending a familiar shiver through both of them. The convoy of vehicles pulled away from the clearing, heading towards Dr. Chen's facility. Despite the presence of others, Lawrence couldn't shake the feeling that his adventure with Daphne was just the beginning. As the landscape rushed by outside the window, he wondered what new challenges and possibilities awaited them at their destination. The journey had only just begun. As the convoy pulled up to Dr. Chen's research facility, Lawrence marveled at the sleek, modern complex nestled in the remote valley. The stark contrast between the high-tech buildings and the surrounding wilderness was jarring. They were quickly ushered inside, the tension between the human and Gorn contingents palpable as they moved through sterile corridors. Dr. Chen led them to the main laboratory, a sprawling space filled with advanced equipment Lawrence could scarcely comprehend. "I'll need to analyze the drink immediately," Dr. Chen announced, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. She turned to Lawrence and Daphne. "Given your prolonged exposure, I'd like to keep you both under observation. There's a monitoring room just down the hall." Agent Steele nodded curtly. "Make it happen, Doctor. We need answers. Fast." As Lawrence and Daphne were led to the observation room, their hands brushed against each other. The simple contact sent a jolt of electricity through them both, a reminder of the connection they'd forged. The observation room was small and clinical, with 2 narrow beds and various monitoring equipment. As the door closed behind them, leaving them alone, the air seemed to thicken with unspoken tension. Daphne moved closer to Lawrence, her scales shimmering under the harsh fluorescent lights. "I never got to thank you properly," she said, her voice low and husky, "for saving me." Lawrence swallowed hard, acutely aware of her proximity. I'm just glad you're safe." Their eyes locked, and in an instant the last shreds of restraint dissolved. Lawrence pulled Daphne close, his lips crashing against hers. The kiss was electric, more intense than anything they'd experienced before. His hands roamed over her cool scales, marveling at the alien texture, while her claws gently raked across his back. They stumbled towards one of the beds, lost in a haze of desire. Lawrence's shirt came off, and he gasped at the sensation of Daphne's scales against his bare chest. Her forked tongue flicked out, tasting his skin, sending shivers down his spine. Just as things were about to progress further, Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the intercom, startling them apart. "Lawrence, Daphne, I've made a breakthrough. Please come to the main lab immediately." Breathing heavily, they reluctantly disentangled themselves. Lawrence quickly pulled his shirt back on, trying to compose himself. Daphne's scales were flushed a deeper shade of green, her eyes still dark with desire. They made their way back to the main laboratory, where Dr. Chen stood beaming over a holographic display. Agent Steele and Commander Zex were already there, along with their respective teams. "The results are fascinating," Dr. Chen began, her excitement evident. The electrolyte drink contains a rare mineral, one I've never seen before. It seems to be extraterrestrial in origin. Lawrence's eyes widened. There was a meteorite crash near my farm years ago. Could it be related? Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. That would explain it. This mineral, when combined with the other ingredients in your drink, creates a compound with remarkable properties. It enhances empathic abilities in Gorn physiology while simultaneously stimulating human pheromone production. The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. Agent Steele was the first to break the silence, his voice sharp. This research needs to be secured immediately. The potential military applications— Absolutely not, Commander Zex interrupted, his scales dripping. This discovery has immense diplomatic potential. It should be shared between our species. As the argument escalated, Lawrence caught Daphne's eye. They both recognized the gravity of the situation, understanding that their unique connection could be key to fostering understanding between their species. Lawrence stepped forward, raising his voice to be heard over the growing chaos. Dr. Chen, I have a suggestion. What if Daphne and I volunteered as test subjects? We've had the most exposure to the drink, and we could help you study its effects more closely. His proposal silenced the room. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with scientific possibility, while Agent Steele and Commander Zex exchanged wary glances. That's actually a brilliant idea, Dr. Chen said slowly. But only if you both consent, of course. The test could be quite intimate in nature. Lawrence looked at Daphne, seeing his own mix of apprehension and excitement mirrored in her eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly. We consent, Daphne said, her voice firm. As the implications of their decision settled over the room, Mike, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Look, I feel pretty useless here with all this science stuff. How about I fly back to the farm and grab some of those meteorite samples? Might be helpful, right? Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. Yes, that would be incredibly valuable. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Mike Rodriguez, he replied with a grin, clearly relieved to have a purpose. As Mike left to prepare for his flight, Lawrence and Daphne were led back to the observation room, this time with Dr. Chen in tow. The air between them crackled with anticipation, both for the test to come and for the chance to explore their connection further. Just as Dr. Chen began setting up her equipment, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the window, they could see a crowd gathering at the facility's gates. Signs waved in the air, some denouncing alien presence on Earth, others demanding full disclosure of the research. The news has leaked, Agent Steele said grimly, entering the room. We've got protesters outside, and it's only going to get worse. Lawrence and Daphne exchanged worried glances. The test hadn't even begun, and already the situation was spiraling out of control. As Dr. Chen attached monitoring devices to their skin, Lawrence couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something much bigger than they had imagined. The first test began, a simple measurement of their physiological responses when in close proximity. As Daphne's hand brushed against his, Lawrence felt his heart rate spike. The monitor beeped in confirmation, and Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose in fascination. Incredible, she murmured, studying the readouts. The reaction is even stronger than I anticipated. As the test progressed, becoming more involved and intimate, Lawrence found himself lost in a whirlwind of sensation. Every touch, every shared breath with Daphne seemed to heighten his awareness of her. It was as if he could sense her emotions, her very thoughts. In the back of his mind, Lawrence knew that the fate of human-Gorn relations might rest on what happened in this room. But for now, all he could focus on was Daphne and the incredible connection they shared. Shared between them, with each touch, each glance, the connection deepened, transcending the physical and verging on something almost telepathic. As Dr. Chen busied herself with adjusting equipment and taking notes, Lawrence and Daphne exchanged a meaningful look. They both felt it, a growing urgency, a sense that they needed to take control of the situation before it spiraled out of hand. When Dr. Chen stepped out briefly to confer with Agent Steele, Lawrence leaned in close to Daphne. We need to do something, he whispered, his breath warm against her scales. This is bigger than just us now. Daphne nodded, her eyes gleaming with understanding. I agree. But how? Lawrence glanced at the door, then back to Daphne. I think I have an idea. During the tests, I noticed the layout of this place. There's a private lab down the hall. That's where Dr. Chen keeps her main research. And the formula for the drink, Daphne added, catching on quickly. They waited for their opportunity, hearts racing in tandem. When the next shift change came, bringing a momentary lull in the constant observation, they made their move. Slipping out of the room, Lawrence led the way through the sterile corridors, every sense on high alert. They reached Dr. Chen's private lab without incident, the door yielding easily to Lawrence's remembered access code. Inside, they found more than they bargained for. Mike stood there, looking startled at their sudden entrance. He was surrounded by crates filled with glowing, greenish rocks, the meteorite samples from Lawrence's farm. What are you two doing here? Mike asked, his eyes darting between them. What we have to, Lawrence replied, moving swiftly to the lab bench. He began gathering equipment and ingredients, his movements sure and purposeful. We need to make more of the drink, Mike, a stronger batch. Understanding dawned on Mike's face. Without another word, he began helping, his pilot's hands steady as he measured out portions of the precious meteorite mineral. As Lawrence worked, Daphne kept watch at the door, her scales rippling with tension. The minutes stretched, each one feeling like an eternity, until finally, Lawrence held up a beaker of glowing liquid. It's ready, he announced, his voice hushed. Lawrence and Daphne looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Then with a shared nod, they each took a long drink. The effect was immediate and intense. Lawrence gasped, feeling as if every nerve in his body had suddenly come alive. He could sense Daphne's presence more acutely than ever before, her thoughts and emotions washing over him in waves. We need to find Steele and Zex, Daphne said, her voice sounding strange in Lawrence's heightened awareness, before they can make any rash decisions. They left Mike to guard the lab and set out, their newfound connection guiding them through the facility like a compass. Lawrence found himself outside the communications room, drawn there by a sense of urgent purpose. Inside, he found Agent Steele hunched over a console, fingers poised to send a message. Lawrence could feel the conflict radiating from the man, the clash between duty and doubt. Agent Steele, Lawrence said softly, causing the man to whirl around. Please, before you do anything, listen to me. Meanwhile, Daphne had made her way to the security center, where Commander Zex was reviewing facility schematics. As she entered, Zex's scales flared in surprise. Diplomat Daphne, he hissed, you should not be here. Perhaps not, Daphne replied, her voice calm and measured. But I am, and we need to talk. Back in the communications room, Lawrence found himself pouring out words, driven by a deep understanding of Steele's inner turmoil. He spoke of peace, of the potential for true understanding between species. With each word, he could feel Steele's perseverance wavering. In the security center, Daphne engaged Zex in a passionate discourse on the benefits of cooperation. Her arguments were eloquent, her empathy enhanced by the compound flowing through her veins. Slowly, she could sense Zex's hardline stance beginning to soften. Suddenly, Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the intercom, startling all four of them. Attention all personnel and guests. I've made a critical breakthrough in my research. Please convene in the main conference room immediately. Lawrence and Daphne seized the moment, gently guiding Steele and Zex towards the conference room. As they walked, Lawrence could feel the tension in the air, the delicate balance of this pivotal moment. They entered the conference room to find Dr. Chen standing before a holographic display, her eyes shining with excitement. As she began to explain her findings, Lawrence felt a surge of hope. This was their chance, the opportunity to change everything. But even as he listened to Dr. Chen's words, Lawrence couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. He and Daphne had set something in motion, something that was rapidly growing beyond their control. As he glanced at Daphne, he saw his own mixture of hope and apprehension mirrored in her eyes. Whatever came next, Lawrence knew, would change not just their lives, but potentially the course of human-Gorn relations forever. And as the implications of their actions began to sink in, he realized that their adventure was just the beginning. In fact, it might be just beginning. The tension in the conference room was palpable as Dr. Chen finished explaining her findings. Lawrence and Daphne exchanged a meaningful glance, their enhanced connection allowing them to sense each other's mix of excitement and apprehension. Before anyone could react to Dr. Chen's revelations, Agent Steele cleared his throat. In light of these developments, we need to take immediate action. Dr. Chen, your research has far-reaching implications for both human and Gorn societies. Commander Zex nodded, his scales shimmering in agreement. Indeed, this discovery could revolutionize interspecies relations. We must proceed carefully, but decisively. As the two officials conferred quietly, Lawrence felt a gentle pressure on his arm. He turned to find Daphne looking at him intently, her eyes conveying a silent message. He understood immediately they needed to take control of the narrative before others made decisions for them. Lawrence stepped forward, drawing the attention of the room. "If I may," he began, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. "Daphne and I have a suggestion." All eyes turned to the unlikely couple. Lawrence took a deep breath, feeling Daphne's unwavering support through their bond. "We volunteer to be ambassadors for this research. Let us show both our species the potential benefits of this compound and our unique connection." A hush fell over the room as the implications of Lawrence's proposal sank in. Dr. Chen was the first to recover, her eyes lighting up with scientific curiosity. That's brilliant. We could organize a tour showcasing the effects of the compound in various environments." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of planning and preparation. As dawn broke over the horizon, Lawrence found himself boarding a sleek government-issued aircraft alongside Daphne, Dr. Chen, Agent Steele, and Commander Zex. Their destination, New York City, the first stop on what was quickly being dubbed a goodwill tour. The flight was a blur of briefings and last-minute preparations. Lawrence barely had time to process the enormity of what they were undertaking before the plane touched down at JFK International Airport. As they disembarked, he was struck by the throng of reporters and curious onlookers gathered on the tarmac. Daphne's scaled hand found his, their fingers intertwining. Through their connection, Lawrence felt her steadying presence, grounding him amidst the chaos. They stepped forward together, ready to face the world. The next few days were a non-stop series of interviews, demonstrations, and public appearances. The pinnacle came on their third day in New York, a live televised event in the heart of Times Square. As Lawrence and Daphne took center stage, the bustling square fell into an expectant hush. Massive screens overhead broadcast their every move to the watching millions. Lawrence felt a moment of panic, but Daphne's calm washed over him through their bond. "Ladies and gentlemen, humans and Gorn," Lawrence began, his voice echoing across the square. "We're here today to show you something extraordinary." What followed was a demonstration of their enhanced empathic abilities that left the audience gasping in awe. Lawrence and Daphne moved in perfect synchronization, their movements a dance of human and Gorn physiology. They completed each other's sentences, anticipated each other's actions, and displayed a level of coordination that seemed almost supernatural. As the demonstration reached its climax, Lawrence felt an overwhelming surge of emotion, love, trust, and a deep, abiding connection that transcended species. Without thinking, he pulled Daphne close, their lips meeting in a passionate kiss. The crowd's reaction was immediate and intense. Gasps of shock mingled with cheers of approval. As they parted, Lawrence became acutely aware of the controversy they had just ignited, but looking into Daphne's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The tour continued, taking them from the skyscrapers of New York to the beaches of Rio de Janeiro. Each stop brought new challenges and opportunities. In London, they shared a private moment high above the city in the London Eye, their enhanced senses making the experience all the more magical. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. In Moscow, they faced their first real threat. As Lawrence and Daphne prepared to address a crowd in Red Square, chaos erupted. A group of masked individuals surged forward, releasing a cloud of noxious gas. Lawrence's instincts kicked in. He pulled Daphne close, shielding her with his body as security personnel swarmed around them. For a heart-stopping moment, he feared the worst. that the attackers had succeeded in neutralizing the compound's effects. But as the gas dissipated, Lawrence realized their connection remained unbroken. If anything, the shared danger had intensified their bond. They emerged from the incident shaken but unharmed, their dedication to continue the tour stronger than ever. As they prepared to leave Earth for the Gorn homeworld, Lawrence couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. What had started as a chance encounter on his farm had blossomed into something world-changing. And as he looked at Daphne, her scales glinting in the starlight, he knew their journey was a long way to go. The shuttle lifted off, carrying them towards new horizons and unknown challenges. Lawrence's hand found Daphne's, their fingers intertwining once more. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The shuttle's landing at Dr. Chen's research facility was smooth, but Lawrence's nerves were anything but. As the doors hissed open, he felt Daphne's hand tighten around his own. Their eyes met, a silent exchange of support passing between them. "Ready?" Lawrence asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Daphne nodded, her scales shimmering with a mix of anticipation and concern. "Together," she replied. They stepped out onto the familiar grounds of the facility, where Dr. Chen and her team awaited them. The scientist's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she approached. "Welcome back," Dr. Chen said, her gaze darting between Lawrence and Daphne. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Lawrence nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken questions hanging in the air. "It was fine, Doctor, but I think we're all eager to get some answers." Dr. Chen's expression turned serious. "Of course, we've prepared a comprehensive battery of tests. If you'll follow me, we can begin immediately." The next few hours were a whirlwind of examinations, scans, and blood draws. Lawrence found himself in a sterile room, surrounded by beeping machines and watchful eyes. As a technician drew yet another vial of blood, he caught sight of his reflection in a nearby monitor. He blinked, startled. Was it his imagination, or did his skin look different? There was a faint shimmer to it, reminiscent of Daphne's scales. Before he could dwell on it, Dr. Chen burst into the room, her face a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Lawrence, Daphne, you need to see this," she said, gesturing for them to follow. In the main laboratory, a large holographic display dominated the center of the room. Dr. Chen manipulated the controls, bringing up side-by-side images of DNA strands. "This," she said, pointing to the left image, "is a sample of Lawrence's DNA from before your exposure to the compound. And this," she continued, indicating the right image, "is from today." Lawrence leaned in, his eyes widening. Even to his untrained eye, the differences were stark. The right-hand DNA strand seemed to shimmer and shift, almost as if it couldn't decide what form to take. "Your DNA is in a state of flux," Dr. Chen explained, her voice filled with awe. "It's adapting, incorporating elements of Gorn genetics. And Daphne," she turned to the Gorn diplomat, "your DNA is showing similar changes, but in reverse. You're both evolving, becoming something new." Lawrence looked down at his hands, noticing for the first time the faint outlines of scales beginning to form on his skin. He turned to Daphne, seeing the wonder in her eyes as she examined her own body, her scales now interspersed with patches of smooth, human-like skin. "What does this mean for us?" Daphne asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. Dr. Chen shook her head. "We're in uncharted territory. Your physiologies are changing in ways we've never seen before. Your internal organs are adapting to process foods from both species. It's extraordinary." As the implications of their transformation sank in, the facility around them burst into a flurry of activity. News of their condition spread rapidly, and soon the research center was flooded with scientists from both human and Gorn institutions, all eager to study this unprecedented case of interspecies adaptation. Amidst the chaos of constant tests and examinations, Lawrence and Daphne found solace in each other's company. Their shared experiences and unique changes created a bond deeper than anything they had known before. In quiet moments between tests, they would sit together, marveling at the changes in their bodies and the depth of their connection. One evening, as they sat in the facility's garden, watching the sunset, Lawrence turned to Daphne. "I never imagined anything like this," he said, running a finger along the scales that now adorned his forearm. "But I wouldn't change it for anything." Daphne leaned into him, her newly softened skin warm against his. "Nor would I," she replied. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Their moment of peace was interrupted by the sound of angry voices. Lawrence looked up to see a crowd gathering outside the facility's gates. Placards waved in the air, bearing slogans like, "Keep humanity pure," and "Stop the alien invasion." Agent Steele appeared beside them, his face grim. "We've got a situation," he said. "A group calling themselves human purists, led by someone named Victor Creed. They're demanding we stop the contamination of the human species." Lawrence felt a chill run down his spine. As he watched the crowd grow larger and more agitated, he realized that their transformation was not just a personal journey or a scientific curiosity. It had become a flashpoint for deep-seated fears and prejudices on both sides. As the chants of the protesters grew louder, Lawrence tightened his grip on Daphne's hand. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the facility grounds, Lawrence couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure was just the beginning. In fact, it might be just beginning. The beginning of a new chapter in their shared journey. As dawn broke over the research facility, Lawrence and Daphne found themselves boarding the Unity spacecraft, a sleek vessel designed for interplanetary travel. Their mission, to visit Harmony, a planet that promised to be the next frontier in human-Gorn relations. The launch was smooth, and soon they were hurtling through space, leaving behind the controversy and protests that had plagued their last days on Earth. Lawrence gazed out the viewport, marveling at the star-studded expanse before them. Beside him, Daphne's scales shimmered with excitement. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Lawrence nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. Here, in the vastness of space, their unique bond seemed to strengthen, their shared consciousness expanding to encompass the wonder of their journey. As they approached Harmony, Lawrence busied himself with the pre-landing checks, his newly developed scales glinting under the ship's lights. Suddenly, a harsh alarm blared through the cabin. "What's happening?" Daphne asked, her voice tight with concern. Lawrence's hands flew over the control panel. "The navigation system's failing. We're veering off course." The Unity shuddered as it entered Harmony's atmosphere at a steep angle. Lawrence fought with the controls, trying to stabilize their descent. But it was a losing battle. The ship bucked and rolled, alarms screaming as they plummeted towards the planet's surface. "Brace for impact!" Lawrence shouted, pulling Daphne close as the ground rushed up to meet them. The crash was violent and deafening. Metal tore, sparks flew, and for a moment everything went dark. When Lawrence regained consciousness, he found himself sprawled on the floor of the wrecked ship, Daphne's unconscious form beside him. Ignoring the pain in his body, Lawrence gently shook Daphne awake. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Daphne groaned, her eyes fluttering open. "I think so. What about you?" Lawrence helped her to her feet, and together they surveyed the damage. The Unity was a twisted wreck, smoke rising from its shattered hull. The communication equipment was destroyed, leaving them cut off from Earth and Gorn. They gathered what supplies they could salvage: emergency rations, basic tools, and a partially damaged data pad containing information about Harmony's ecosystem. With a final glance at the wreckage of their ship, Lawrence and Daphne stepped out onto the alien world. The landscape that greeted them was breathtaking. Bioluminescent forests stretched as far as the eye could see, their ethereal glow pulsing gently in the alien twilight. Crystal-clear lakes dotted the terrain, reflecting the purple sky above where two moons hung like silent sentinels. Lawrence took a deep breath, surprised to find he could breathe easily. "The atmosphere," he mused. "It's perfect for both of us." Daphne nodded, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. "It's like this planet was made for us." As night fell, they trekked through the alien terrain, marveling at the strange flora and fauna. Lawrence's newly developed scales provided protection against the abrasive vegetation, while Daphne's more human-like skin allowed her to regulate her body temperature in the varying climate. They found a defensible position near a freshwater stream and set about constructing a shelter using materials from their crashed ship and the surrounding environment. As they worked together, their movements in perfect synchronization, Lawrence couldn't help but feel a surge of attraction towards Daphne. Under the alien stars, their eyes met, and without a word they came together. Their kiss was passionate, a release of the tension and fear from their crash, mixed with the wonder and excitement of their new surroundings. As they made love, their unique physiologies seemed to heighten every sensation, their empathic bond allowing them to experience each other's pleasure as well as their own. The next morning, Lawrence awoke to a strange sensation. Opening his eyes, he found himself surrounded by a group of beings, unlike any he had ever seen. They were tall and slender, with iridescent skin that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Their large, almond-shaped eyes regarded Lawrence and Daphne with unmistakable curiosity. "Daphne," Lawrence whispered, gently rousing her. "We have company." Daphne sat up, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of the alien beings. "Who are they?" she breathed. Lawrence shook his head. "I don't know, but I think we've just made first contact with the natives of Harmony." Using their enhanced empathic abilities, Lawrence and Daphne reached out to the beings, attempting to communicate. To their surprise, they felt a response, not in words but in emotions and images. These beings, whom they decided to call Harmonians, seemed to possess a highly developed collective consciousness. Through this shared consciousness, the Harmonians conveyed their willingness to help. They gestured for Lawrence and Daphne to follow them, leading the couple through the bioluminescent forest. As they walked, Lawrence noticed changes in his body accelerating. His scales became more pronounced, developing a soft glow that mimicked the surrounding flora. Beside him, Daphne's skin took on a subtle iridescence, shimmering in the dappled light of the forest. After what seemed like hours of walking, they emerged from the forest into a clearing. Before them stood a city unlike anything they had ever seen. Towering structures of what appeared to be living crystal rose into the sky, seamlessly integrated with the natural environment. Bridges of light connected the buildings, and everywhere they looked, they saw evidence of advanced technology working in perfect harmony with nature. As they entered the city, Lawrence and Daphne exchanged a look of wonder. Whatever they had expected to find on Harmony, this far exceeded their wildest dreams. They were about to embark on a journey of discovery that would change not only their lives, but potentially the future of human-gorn relations forever. The Harmonians led them towards a central structure, its spiraling form reaching towards the purple sky. Lawrence felt a surge of excitement and apprehension. What secrets would this alien city reveal? And how would these revelations shape their mission and their future? Lawrence and Daphne stepped into the central structure, their eyes adjusting to the soft, ambient light emanating from the crystalline walls. The Harmonians guided them through winding corridors, their movements fluid and graceful. As they reached what appeared to be a control room filled with holographic displays and pulsating energy conduits, Lawrence felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to explore further. He turned to Daphne, seeing the same curiosity reflected in her eyes. "We need to learn more about this place," he whispered, his scaled skin shimmering in the ethereal light. Daphne nodded, her iridescent skin glowing softly. "Agreed. But we should also investigate that distress signal we detected earlier. It could be crucial." With a mix of gestures and empathic communication, they conveyed their intentions to the Harmonians. The beings seemed to understand, offering no resistance as Lawrence and Daphne made their way back to the forest. The couple trekked through the bioluminescent wilderness, their altered physiologies proving advantageous. Lawrence's tough scales protected him from the dense, sometimes abrasive vegetation, while Daphne's shimmering skin helped them navigate in the dim light. As they pushed deeper into the forest, their bond intensified. During a brief rest, they found themselves drawn to each other, their unique bodies intertwining amidst the alien flora. The experience was electric, their heightened senses and empathic connection amplifying every touch, every sensation. After several days of challenging terrain, they finally reached the source of the distress signal. A Gorn scout ship lay half buried in the soil, its hull breached and overgrown with vibrant, phosphorescent vines. "Hello," Lawrence called out, approaching the wreckage cautiously. "Is anyone there?" A rustling sound came from within the ship, followed by a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a female Gorn, her scales dulled and her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. I never thought anyone would find me." Daphne stepped forward, her presence visibly calming the Gorn scientist. "We're here to help. I'm Daphne, and this is Lawrence." Lyra's eyes darted between them, lingering on Lawrence's scaled skin. "A human? But how?" As they explained their situation, Lyra revealed her own story. She had been part of a secret Gorn expedition to study harmony, but her ship malfunctioned, forcing her to crash land months ago. Since then, she had been surviving by adapting to the planet's unique ecosystem. Working together, they salvaged useful technology from Lyra's ship. Her scientific knowledge proved invaluable in understanding Harmony's complex ecosystem and the ancient technology they had encountered in the Harmonian city. Using parts from both crashed ships, they constructed a long-range communication device. Just as they were about to activate it, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. "Earthquake!" Lawrence shouted, pulling Daphne and Lyra away from the unstable wreckage. The quake intensified, the forest floor splitting open to reveal a hidden underground complex. As the tremors subsided, they found themselves standing at the entrance of a vast, technologically advanced facility. "We should investigate," Lyra suggested, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. They entered the complex, marveling at the sleek design and unfamiliar technology. In what appeared to be a control center, Lawrence accidentally brushed against a console. Suddenly, alarms blared, and holographic displays sprang to life. "What's happening?" Daphne asked, her voice tight with concern. Lyra studied the displays, her eyes widening. "It appears to be some kind of planetary defense system, and I think we just activated it." The complex shuddered, blast doors slamming shut around them. They were trapped. "We need to shut this down," Lawrence said, moving to examine the console. "Before it—" His words were cut off as a group of Harmonians emerged from hidden passages, their luminescent bodies pulsing with agitation. Using their enhanced empathic abilities, Lawrence and Daphne reached out, attempting to convey their peaceful intentions. The Harmonians hesitated, then seemed to recognize the couple from their earlier encounter. A tense but non-violent atmosphere settled over the group as they all turned their attention to the active defense system. Working together, humans, Gorn, and Harmonians raced to deactivate the system. As they worked, Lawrence noticed changes accelerating in his body. His scales developed a soft glow, mimicking the bioluminescent flora of Harmony. Beside him, Daphne's skin took on a more pronounced iridescence, while Lyra's dull scales began to shimmer with newfound vitality. Just as they managed to power down the defense system, a final burst of energy pulsed through the complex. The energy wave washed over them, interacting with the unique compound in their bodies and catalyzing further biological changes. As the dust settled, they emerged from the complex to find Harmony's landscape dramatically altered. The planet's self-adapting nature had accelerated, creating an environment that seemed to be a perfect blend of Earth-like, Gorn-like, and native Harmonian ecosystems. Lawrence, Daphne, and Lyra stood at the entrance, overlooking the transformed terrain. Their bodies had changed too, becoming more attuned to Harmony's environment, blurring the lines between human, Gorn, and Harmonian. "Look," Daphne said, pointing to the sky. Two distant points of light were growing larger, ships approaching from opposite directions. "Earth and Gorn vessels," Lyra confirmed, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. Lawrence took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "We need to prepare. Whatever happens next will shape the future of all our species." As the ships drew nearer, Lawrence, Daphne, and Lyra exchanged determined looks. They had uncovered Harmony's true nature as a self-adapting world, capable of accommodating various species. Now they faced the challenge of ensuring peaceful first contact and fostering cooperation between humans, Gorn, and Harmonians. The trio moved quickly, knowing they had little time before the ships would arrive. They needed to establish communication, prepare the Harmonians for the newcomers, and somehow convey the incredible potential of this unique planet. As they worked, the transformed landscape of Harmony stretched out before them, a living testament to the possibilities of coexistence and adaptation. Adaptation. As they worked, the transformed landscape of harmony stretched out before them, a living testament to the possibilities of coexistence and cooperation between species. Lawrence's eyes darted between the approaching ships, his mind racing. "We need to establish contact quickly," he said, his bioluminescent scales pulsing with urgency. "Daphne, help me set up the communication array." They hurried to the salvaged equipment, their movements fluid and synchronized. Lyra joined them, her once dull scales now shimmering with renewed vitality. "I'll try to identify the Gorn vessel," she offered, her clawed hands dancing over the unfamiliar human technology. As they worked, a group of Harmonians approached, their iridescent bodies glowing with curiosity and concern. Through their empathic bond, Lawrence conveyed their need for assistance. The Harmonians nodded in understanding, their large eyes blinking in unison. With a crackle of static, the communication array came to life. Lawrence took a deep breath and broadcast a message to both approaching ships. "This is Lawrence Chen, Federation scientist, to incoming vessels. We request peaceful contact. Harmony is a unique world of immense scientific value. Please respond." Tense moments passed before a stern female voice replied, "This is Admiral Helena Zhao of the Earth vessel Galileo. We're receiving you, Dr. Chen. What is your situation?" Before Lawrence could respond, another voice cut in, deep and gravelly. "High Commander Krell of the Gorn Imperium, explain your presence on this world immediately." Daphne placed a reassuring hand on Lawrence's shoulder, her touch sending a wave of calm through their empathic link. He nodded, gathering his thoughts. "Admiral Zhao, Commander Krell, we've made a groundbreaking discovery here on Harmony. This planet is unlike anything we've encountered before. It's critical that we meet in person to discuss our findings. We propose a neutral meeting ground near our current location." There was a pause, filled only by the soft humming of alien insects and the distant rumble of the approaching ships. Finally, Admiral Zhao spoke. "Agreed, we'll send down a small team." "The Gorn Imperium will participate," Krell growled, his tone leaving no room for argument. As the ships began their descent, Lawrence, Daphne, and Lyra worked quickly with the Harmonians to prepare a suitable landing area. They cleared a space in the lush, bioluminescent vegetation, creating a natural arena surrounded by towering, crystal-like structures. The Earth shuttle touched down first, its sleek design a stark contrast to the organic landscape. Admiral Zhao emerged, flanked by a small security detail. Her eyes widened as she took in the transformed appearances of Lawrence and Daphne. Moments later, the Gorn battlecruiser landed with a thunderous roar. High Commander Krell stomped down the ramp, his massive form dwarfing the human delegation. His reptilian eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. Lawrence stepped forward, his scaled skin shimmering in the alien sunlight. "Welcome to Harmony," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We have much to discuss." Admiral Zhao's hand hovered near her weapon, her gaze flicking between Lawrence and the Gorn commander. "Dr. Chen, what's happened to you?" Before Lawrence could respond, Krell's voice boomed across the clearing. "You reek of Gorn biology, human. Explain yourself." Daphne moved to Lawrence's side, her iridescent skin pulsing softly. "Please, everyone remain calm," she said, projecting waves of tranquility through her empathic abilities. The effect was immediate, with both delegations visibly relaxing. Lyra stepped forward, addressing her fellow Gorn. "High Commander, what we've discovered here could change everything. This planet, Harmony, it's not just a world, it's a bridge between species." Lawrence nodded, gesturing to their transformed bodies. "We've undergone physical changes, adaptations triggered by Harmony itself. But more importantly, we've unlocked incredible potential for interspecies cooperation." As Lawrence began to explain further, a commotion erupted from the Earth delegation. A man pushed his way to the front, his face contorted with rage. "Abominations!" he shouted, pulling a small device from his pocket. Lawrence's enhanced senses kicked into overdrive. He caught a whiff of something acrid, dangerous. "Stop him!" he yelled, lunging forward. The man, Dr. Victor Creed, Lawrence realized with a jolt, had already activated the device. A fine mist began to spray from it, quickly expanding into a toxic cloud. Without hesitation, Lawrence and Daphne sprang into action. Lawrence's bioluminescent scales flared brightly, illuminating the harmful particles. Daphne raised her hands, her skin shimmering with energy, as she generated an electromagnetic field around the cloud. The Harmonians, sensing the danger, joined their efforts. Together, they contained and neutralized the bioweapon before it could reach either delegation. As the crisis subsided, Admiral Zhao's security team tackled Creed, restraining him. The Admiral's face was a mix of shock and admiration. "Incredible," she breathed, looking at Lawrence and Daphne with new respect. High Commander Krell stomped forward, his earlier aggression replaced by curiosity. "Such abilities, perhaps there is more to learn here than I first thought." With the immediate threat neutralized, Lawrence seized the moment. "This is just a fraction of what Harmony offers. Please, let us show you what we've discovered." As the group moved towards the Harmonian settlement, the Harmonians themselves took the lead, guiding them through their incredible city. The Earth and Gorn delegations marveled at the seamless integration of advanced technology and natural elements. Lyra activated the holographic projector, displaying data on Harmony's unique properties. "As you can see," she explained, "this planet is capable of adapting to support multiple species simultaneously. It's a potential game-changer for colonization efforts." Admiral Zhao and Commander Krell listened intently, their earlier hostility forgotten in the face of such remarkable possibilities. However, the Harmonians had one final revelation to share. They led the group to a massive underground chamber, filled with rows upon rows of stasis pods. Each pod contained a perfectly preserved specimen of an alien species, many entirely unknown to both humans and Gorn. "By the stars," Admiral Zhao whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Krell ran a clawed hand over one of the pods, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "This changes everything." As the implications of this discovery sank in, Lawrence felt a renewed sense of purpose. Harmony wasn't just a potential colony world. It was a repository of galactic knowledge and biodiversity. The future of multiple species now hinged on what happened here. Admiral Zhao turned to High Commander Krell, her expression solemn. "I think it's clear we need to establish a joint presence here, for the sake of scientific discovery, if nothing else." Krell nodded slowly, his reptilian features unreadable. "Agreed, but this must be handled carefully. The power contained in this world could easily be misused." As discussions about the formation of a joint scientific outpost began, Lawrence, Daphne, and Lyra found themselves at the center of it all. Their unique physiologies and first-hand experience with Harmony made them the ideal candidates to lead the research efforts. However, as plans were being made and agreements forged, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath their feet vibrated subtly, and a strange, pulsing energy signature appeared on Lyra's handheld scanner. "What is that?" Daphne asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. Lyra studied the readings, her eyes widening. It's coming from the planet's core, but these energy patterns, they're like nothing I've ever seen before." Lawrence exchanged glances with Daphne and Lyra. Even as they stood on the brink of a new era of cooperation, it seemed Harmony still held secrets waiting to be uncovered. The journey of discovery was just getting started. The ground beneath their feet continued to vibrate, and the energy signature on Lyra's scanner intensified. Lawrence exchanged a concerned glance with Daphne and Lyra. "We need to investigate this," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. Admiral Zhao and High Commander Krell, sensing the gravity of the situation, quickly agreed to postpone further discussions about the joint outpost. "Go," Admiral Zhao said, her tone authoritative. "Report back as soon as you find anything." Lawrence nodded, then turned to the Harmonians. "Can you guide us to the source of this energy?" he asked through their empathic link. The Harmonians pulsed with affirmation, their bodies glowing brighter in response. As they prepared to descend into the planet's depths, Daphne organized a small team of human and Gorn scientists to accompany them. Equipment was hastily gathered, and within minutes, they were ready to embark on their expedition. The entrance to the underground network was hidden behind a shimmering waterfall of bioluminescent liquid. As they passed through, the cool droplets sent tingles across their skin, heightening their senses. The cavern beyond opened into a vast system of crystalline tunnels, each pulsing with an otherworldly light. Lawrence led the way, his hybrid physiology allowing him to intuitively navigate the twisting passages. Daphne followed close behind, her empathic abilities picking up on the increasing excitement and trepidation of their team. Lyra brought up the rear, her eyes fixed on the scanner, calling out directions as the energy signature grew stronger. As they ventured deeper, the energy permeating the air began to affect their bodies. Lawrence noticed it first, a faint glow emanating from beneath his scales. He looked back to see Daphne and Lyra experiencing the same phenomenon, their hybrid forms illuminated from within. "It's like the planet is recognizing us," Daphne whispered, her voice filled with wonder. The tunnels gradually widened, opening into a massive cavern. Crystalline structures jutted from the walls and ceiling, each thrumming with energy. At the center stood a colossal formation that could only be described as a control room, its surfaces covered in pulsing symbols and swirling patterns of light. Lawrence approached the central crystal, drawn by an inexplicable urge. It towered over him, its facets reflecting the glow of their bodies. Without conscious thought, he raised his hand and placed it on the smooth surface. The reaction was instantaneous. Energy surged through Lawrence's body, and the crystal flared with blinding intensity. The ground beneath them shuddered, and beams of light shot from the formation, racing through the tunnels towards the surface. "We need to get back up there," Lyra shouted over the rumble of shifting earth. They sprinted through the tunnels, their bodies illuminating the way. As they emerged from the underground network, they were met with a sight beyond imagination. Harmony was transforming before their eyes. Land masses shifted like pieces of a colossal puzzle, mountains rose and fell, and new bodies of water formed in the blink of an eye. The sky shimmered with aurora-like displays, painting the scene in a kaleidoscope of colors. Admiral Zhao and High Commander Krell stood transfixed, their earlier hostilities forgotten in the face of this planetary metamorphosis. The Harmonians swayed in unison, their bodies pulsing in rhythm with the planet's changes. As the transformation settled, distinct regions became apparent. Lawrence recognized landscapes reminiscent of Earth, others that could have been plucked from Gorn, and still others that were entirely alien, presumably suitable for the countless species preserved in the stasis pods. Before anyone could speak, a holographic image flickered to life in the center of their gathering. The figure that appeared was unlike any species they had encountered, a being of pure energy, its form constantly shifting and flowing. "Greetings, explorers," the hologram spoke, its voice resonating in their minds rather than their ears. "You have awakened Harmony's true purpose." The being explained that Harmony was created eons ago by a coalition of advanced species. It was designed as a failsafe for galactic biodiversity, capable of adapting to provide a home for any species that discovered it. The ultimate goal, the hologram revealed, was to foster peace and cooperation among diverse civilizations. As the holographic message faded, a profound silence fell over the gathered humans, Gorn, and Harmonians. The implications of what they had discovered were staggering. Admiral Zhao was the first to break the silence. She turned to High Commander Krell, her expression resolute. "Commander, I believe we have a unique opportunity here." Krell nodded, his reptilian features softening. "Indeed, Admiral, this discovery transcends our previous conflicts." In a historic moment, Admiral Zhao and High Commander Krell jointly declared Harmony a neutral zone. They agreed it would be open to settlement by both humans and Gorn, as well as serve as a sanctuary for the revival of the preserved species. As the sun set on this momentous day, Lawrence, Daphne, and Lyra stood together, watching the first ships land with supplies for the new joint colony. Their bodies still glowed faintly, a reminder of their unique connection to Harmony. "So," Lyra said, her voice filled with excitement, "where do we start?" Lawrence smiled, taking Daphne's hand in his. "We start by building a future where all species can thrive together." As night fell, the bioluminescent flora of Harmony lit up, mirroring the stars above. The planet pulsed with potential, ready to become a beacon of hope for the galaxy. For Lawrence, Daphne, and Lyra, their greatest adventure was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.